watch or listen to it later. So welcome to Making Web Accessibility Work at Your Campus. My name is Anna Gazdowitz, and this is...
I'm Lucy Greco. I am the Accessibility Evangelist.
So we work on a team called Web Platform Services, and we are just as happy and productive as this jubilant team of sled dogs working all together. And Frances, of course. Frances is the guide dog sitting on the floor there, and here she is looking inquisitive in Lucy's office. So she is very much, just as much a part of our team. So this screen is this is a screenshot of our top-level team homepage, web.berkeley.edu, just as you get an idea of the team that we work for. It's 3 tiers of sort. It's the Open Berkeley platform, it's the web accessibility team, and then we also facilitate the relationship between the campus and Pantheon, an external website hosting provider. So the third thing we won't talk about today, because that's not quite as interesting, but I will talk about the first 2 things. So I wanted to give that as a general introduction. So today's presentation, thank you very much for being here. I really do appreciate it. I've gone to some really amazing presentations today, and I feel like I have a lot of adrenaline and excited energy. So hopefully I don't come across as overwhelming as a result. So generally speaking, I think you're here, maybe you're probably aware that the UC has an accessibility policy. What I'm curious to know and why I want us all to be here is to talk about the fact, does everybody else know? How far is the awareness of web accessibility and the policy itself reaching to our greater UC audiences? How are we making web accessibility work at our campuses? So we'll talk today about what our team at Berkeley does, what we've done in the past, what we want to do moving forward. And if there's an opportunity, I'd also love to hear what other folks are doing at other UC campuses, and maybe we can all learn from one another. So, hi. So before we get into that, though, where else can you learn about web accessibility at the UC if you're interested, if you don't already know about these resources? The UCOP website is linked above, and that's the general electronic accessibility policy and other information. And then there have been some awesome previous UCCSC presentations about web accessibility. So in 2016, Jen from UCSD did a session on practical web accessibility, which is sort of a collection of tips and tricks. Lucy and our coworker Caroline last year did a presentation called How to Implement Accessible Purchasing at Your Campus. We'll touch a little bit on purchasing today, but that one goes into the nitty-gritty. And last year also there was a presentation all about accessibility testing. And I think there was actually 2, part 1 and 2 of that, so there's lots of good information there. And this year there were 3 different awesome Site Improve presentations. Site Improve being the latest product that we have at the UC in order to help with accessibility testing and awareness. So hopefully if you weren't able to go to one of those, you'll be able to catch a recording or at least find out more about the product in one way or another. So why are we here? There's a little boy facing a chalkboard with lots of question marks, and he's looking a little stressed out. Food for thought, our entire UC population is quite large, it's quite varied, students, faculty, staff, etc. So again, with our current efforts, how many people are we truly reaching, and how many people are potentially being left out? So in general, what can we all do to best promote accessibility at our campuses to ultimately uphold the policy and make our websites better for everybody? So I would like to go into how it all began at UC Berkeley. And at UC Berkeley, it started with a passion for accessibility, and there's a little flame emoji. So to provide some background, I'm going to hand the reins over to Lucy with this slide, and then I'll read the next slide. At UC Berkeley, it all started with a passion, and Lucy was there from the get-go. And the slides here in the beginning, before there was a policy, there was a Berkeley working group. It was a community born from interest, and it was 100% volunteer effort, and there were weekly web access quote-unquote clinics, and these were Fridays at 8 a.m. And I want you to wrap your brain around that one for a second. Fridays at 8 a.m. Yeah. So that, I'm going to hand it over to Lucy now.
For 7 years. So what it started out as is a group of about 5 or 6 people who were from IT and 2 people from the Disabled Students Program who had this idea that we needed to have, some form of accessibility policy. And this was back in 2005. So to give you some perspective, we finally had a policy in 2013. It's a lot of effort, a lot of work. And this group met, every week and was working on trying to figure out how we would get a policy and who we should engage, and just going through, the UC long policy process. And one of the members of this group said in the meeting once, we're talking about this, but I actually have no idea what we're talking about. I don't know what this web accessibility thing is that we're so passionate about. We're so interested. She was a manager in our human resources department, and she led their web team, and she was a real good go-getter, and she was a friend of one of the other women who was in the group, and she came to these meetings and she goes, it all sounds great, but I need to understand. Can we look at my website, the website that my team creates? And that was the birth of our clinics. And it was really funny because she dragged her brand new employee to that meeting where we were going to look at their website. The person had started, it was Tuesday of that week, and she says, you've got to come with me. We're going to have our website reviewed. We're going to see what it's like with a screen reader. And that woman that she brought with her is my manager today. So
All comes full circle.
It all comes full circle, and it's really important to say that, because what we did was at that very first meeting, we looked at their website and we looked at it with a screen reader, and we analyzed it a little bit with some of the principles that we were aware of, because we knew that things like color contrast were important. And that's where our clinics began. The following week, one of the other members said, I want to look at ours. And then somebody else said, I want to look at ours. And we went from a group of about 5 people to, we have a mailing list that has about 100 people on it now, 300 or 400 people.
Give or take.
Give or
50, I don't know.
Well, and the reason we don't really know is because a lot of the people on that list have retired.
Yeah. Or left to another institution or whatever.
Exactly. Yeah. So there was a lot of people on this listserv. And I am not kidding. We really did a website a week from 2005 to 2009. It was really it was a very valuable service to the campus. We had a community of practice on campus for websites, and one of our members was in that community of practice, and she said, you guys should do one of these clinics for one of our meetings. So about 8 months after we'd started doing these clinics, we did a fake clinic on a Stanford website.
Boo,
because
Stanford.
We didn't want to publicize somebody's website out of our group. So we did this thing on a Stanford website. We had we found all kinds of problems with the Stanford website. It was really quite funny. So that's where we started from. And what happened was people would hear about these clinics, and people was like, I want my website reviewed. And hey, I need this help, and this is a service. And then 2009 hit, and everybody knows what happened in 2009. The budget. And the budget meant that all of us were told to step back a little bit. So we dropped down to doing, we did the clinics, but we didn't do anything else. And then in 2012, it was 2011, we were told, you have to stop. People were told that they couldn't go to this weekly meeting. And I specifically was told, your job is direct service to students. You cannot be helping these other departments. That's not acceptable. It's not appropriate. You're hearing something that's familiar from my previous session. Same person, by the way. So our clinic stopped, and the campus realized that there was a problem. The campus realized very quickly that there was a problem, because some of the people who were in our leadership by this point in time actually had been people who came to our clinics and got valuable resources. Our CTO right now, who we report up to, was at that point in time in charge of our email team, and he brought, when they were changing the interface from squirrel mail to round cube or something like that, I don't even remember, but we did an accessibility review, and he was able to determine through our accessibility review that we couldn't offer the new interface. We had to offer both interfaces because one interface was completely inaccessible, and the other one. So he knew how valuable it was. He had learned something from it. He had used the service. So about a year after we were told to cease and desist, there was a vacuum in our administration. The CIO had left, and there was no one really there. The interim was new. He was definitely only interim. So he wasn't making any big decisions. So they created a new position for me. So this grassroots volunteer group, remember now, we had a lot of people, Friday mornings, 8 a.m., none of them were paid to be there. fact, most of us were told to stop. So the position was created, and my colleague, Caroline Boyden, who, she was the UX person and the person who knew how to read the source code behind what I found, and we became this dynamic duo. I was given full FTE, and she was given partial FTE, to now take that, what we were doing as volunteers and grassroots, and formalize it. So today, we now have clinics. We have them every first and third week of the month, and units are encouraged to come to those clinics. And we've taken, this situation where we all sat down in the room, and now we actually give them formal reports, and we give them recommendations in those reports, and hopefully people follow through. Yeah. And back to Anna. Sorry it took so long.
That's okay. So yeah, as Lucy mentioned, at this point it kind of became official, right? And we were filling this gap, this need now for a central team. This is the point when I joined the team too, so thank you, policy, because I have a really cool job now. And as Lucy mentioned, this sort of opened the door to some new great things. So we have our standardized web access clinics that I'll go into detail about after this. We also provide just general resources on our web access website, webaccess.berkeley.edu, and that's just really open to anybody, but it is definitely tailored to the UC community. And we're available for general consulting, and that's the free common good service version of consulting, not the recharge version of consulting. So anytime folks have questions about what does the policy mean, what does web accessibility mean, I have a question about this product I'm trying to purchase for the UC, we're there to answer those questions. And provide even additional follow-up meetings. And Lucy meets frequently with folks across campus when they just have general questions about things.
It's fun stuff.
It's fun stuff. So more about our clinics. So as Lucy mentioned, so these are now, they're a free common good service. They're 1.5 or so hour sessions with the team and the people who work on the website or application. But anyone on the campus is invited to attend, and we post about them on our mailing list. And Lucy runs through the website or application with her screen reader, and then Caroline and I look at the keyboard testing, and we try to look at color contrast when we can, but we also just encourage folks like, that's really easy to test on your own. Here's all the tools.
In fact, our report has standardized links at the bottom to all the major tools that people should be using.
Exactly, yeah. We explain the issues, we provide actual recommendations for fixes too when we have them, as opposed to saying like, well, Lucy can't navigate this, we try to say why, right? And we provide that all in a written report. And we regularly receive really positive feedback, not to toot our own horn, but we have really frequent repeat customers. Like we held a clinic a couple months ago, and it was for a third-party product, and this was a woman in a leadership role in IT, and she was totally blown away by the fact that this was an available service and how much she learned. She basically kept saying how unusual it was for either a department or a third-party vendor to get this sort of in-depth user testing and all for free. So the fact that that's valued and it continues to be valued at that level is really essential for us.
And one of the third-party vendors that we have actually reviewed for sends the units they work for that are different units to us.
Right.
So we've had a vendor who's a web developer actually say to their customers, make sure you schedule our web access clinic early on.
Yeah.
It's so cool.
It's so cool. So what do people learn at a web access clinic? Obviously an introduction to web accessibility and how it's important, but there's other stuff too. And it can vary depending how technical the clinic attendees are, right? So how much experience they may or may not have yet with the concept of web accessibility. And we try to meet them all in the middle, right? So we meet with some folks who are really advanced web developers. They're already really familiar with a lot of the processes. But then other folks are less technical, and maybe they just make simple updates to their websites, and they're new to web accessibility altogether, and everybody learns something. Even if it ends up just being like boilerplate stuff, or that we really have the time to dig into the details. We've seen it all.
It could just be that they walk away with, my God, my headings suck.
Yeah. So I mentioned earlier about that Lucy and Caroline did a presentation about procurement last year. So this is just the boilerplate stuff about it. So this developed along with the onset of our official service, and it was a partnership with the supply chain department, which is the procurement side of things. And I'm not going to go much into detail, but essentially this was an attempt at like a pragmatic approach to addressing the concept of web accessibility before the third-party vendors and products can even get through the door at the UC. And it essentially means that we developed language and checklists for the RFPs, as well as guidance for the buyers on how to actually interpret those answers in the checklist and the RFPs. And then our team reviews and advises on the RFPs regularly. So, we don't expect the buyers and supply chain to be experts in like what, because especially the checklist is a lot of technical stuff, like directly from the W3C. And we don't expect them to be experts. So they often will write to us and say, hey, we got these answers from a vendor. We're not really sure how to interpret them. What do you think? And then we tell them how they should proceed.
And FYI, we've just published a simplified version of that at the
Yes.
UCOP website.
Yeah.
But it's still to be tested to see how well vendors respond to it.
Yeah. And these documents were borrowed heavily from the CSU. So we should all thank our friends at California State University for their hard work. We've made some really, really key partnerships the past few years, and this has all had a really solid impact on our efforts in the rest of campus, and we really, really could not do what we do without our valued partners. And some of those partners are the Office of Communication and Public Affairs is the unit responsible for the main berkeley.edu gateway site, and then they have other high-profile website projects like news.berkeley.edu. And they're also the stewards of the Berkeley brand, so the look and feel of websites and print materials, right? So we meet with them regularly to test their websites as well as their templates, and this helps ensure that there's a wider audience of folks benefiting from these efforts and that other campus departments adapting those materials are adapting accessible materials. And then research, teaching, and learning is a relative, oops, sorry. Where did my mouse go?
I don't know.
I have speaker notes, but I can't quite get to them. Oh well. So research, teaching, and learning, they're a relatively new conglomerate of units and departments. And educational technology services, which is within RTL, they're really huge in and of itself. They're responsible for all the technical services on campus, so for faculty and students, et cetera. And they're obviously responsible for a lot of websites and web-based products. And so that includes our campus LMS, Learning Management System. So partnering with them to ensure that web accessibility is a part of all the processes has been really essential and huge. The last one also is a Berkeley Resource Center for Online Education, BERCO. So they're responsible for lots and lots of online curriculum, which is huge. There's lots of folks that are taking online courses, and that includes lots of little like third-party applications that they tack on to their LMS and that kind of thing. So they kind of became evangelized to accessibility early on, and they are adamant about it, and that is wonderfully valuable.
They quality assure. They're a for-charge unit on campus, so faculty will go to them and pay for their courses to be online, and their courses will be online and QA'd for accessibility as well.
Yeah.
QA'd. I don't think that's
QA'd, quality assurance.
Assured. That's an assured.
So that's what the web access team focuses on in particular. But another big part of the web platform services team is the Open Berkeley platform. And this is a website platform for the campus that we manage, and it keeps us quite busy. I'm going to go into more detail now as to why this platform is important in regards to promoting accessibility at the campus. So it's a turnkey solution, so we provide the platform itself, and the site owners are just responsible for their content and their site structure, and we take care of all the security, accessibility, and maintenance, right? So it's the full package deal. We take care of, as a result, all the heavy lifting when it comes to accessibility. So we've taken care of all of to make sure that the code base and the functionality are accessible so that the site owners don't have to worry about that. And we also cover accessibility best practices in our training and our online documentation, that sort of thing. And it's the little things like when site builders write to us and they ask, hey, can I have all of my website's links open automatically in a new tab? We write back and explain why we don't allow that by default, right? So it's included in all of our processes when we are deploying and spinning up new sites. And then just to point out a couple of examples from our documentation. So these are 2 screenshots just from like the top of 2 different pages within our site builders and editors guides on how to use the platform. So rather than collect accessibility best practices in regards to creating content, like collect them maybe in one page or something along those lines, that's too easy to forget or gloss over. So instead we've included them within the actual context of how to use the platform functionality. So when someone is consulting a page on either how to add headings or how to add tables to their website, that instruction on using that accessibly is embedded within the how-to documentation. So as you can see up here, there's a proper use of headings as an accessibility best practice, and we link to our pages on the web access site that explains why it's important.
So they can never say too long, did not read.
I mean, it is kind of long, but and then below here in the tables, how to add tables, the first item, that's the expand collapse item, is use tables correctly for accessibility. And then the next items are table header, table scope, table caption, right? And it's not put up there as a like, you should do this because it's the best way to be accessible. It's just there as like, you just do this, right? That is implied. And then regarding feature development and maintenance, so we test the entire platform regularly, and Site Improve has helped a lot in that regard, actually, the rollout of that product available to the campus. Any new feature or functionality that is rolled out to the platform is vetted for accessibility before deploying. And then I wanted to note something about automated testing. I don't know how many folks in the room are familiar with continuous integration testing. Some nods. So it helps prevent regressions, right, when you're doing any kind of software or web development. But as a bonus, it performs sort of low rent accessibility testing. I am not an expert on this. I borrowed a lot of this stuff from our coworker Caroline, who is our master, but she loves to say that BHAT saves our bacon, because BHAT is a continuous integration automated testing tool. And basically the tests step through real site functions. That's like editing a page, and they use real browsers with JavaScript enabled. So our test setup doesn't emulate any kind of mouse behaviors, so it can't be operated with a keyboard, and so therefore it can't be tested. So if a test runs and it can't run something through the keyboard, that also tells us it's probably not accessible either, since keyboard accessibility is a good proxy for overall accessibility, because many assistive technologies rely on keyboard emulation. So that takes care of a lot of it, but of course we also do a lot of our own manual testing.
Everything from color, well, we have used the brands, so the brands have already been vetted for
Yes,
accessibility.
exactly.
So we also run it through the screen reader. We examine how a person using Dragon would work with it. We look at a module. We look at samples of that module, and before that module is allowed to be used by any of our customers.
Yeah, and it's kind of a zero tolerance thing too. Like folks write in and they're like, I really, really want to embed this widgety thing. And we're like, well, sorry, it doesn't work with the keyboard, so it's not getting through the door. And if that means we lose customers, well, so be it. And it is what it is. So moving on, we've mentioned Site Improve a few times, and I'm not going to spend a ton of time on this because there have been some great sessions about it, but it has opened up all sorts of new opportunities. So in particular, there's lots of how-to documentation on how to use the tool, and Lucy and Chris are really the experts in this regard if people have more questions. But a few things we wanted to note in regards to the access that the UC now has. With great power comes great responsibility. Just because your site scores high on Site Improve doesn't necessarily mean that it's fully accessible. So it just means it passes at an automated level. And for instance, Site Improve actually can't test for basic keyboard accessibility. So maybe your site will check a lot of the boxes in terms of what Site Improve can check for. But someone who, say, has limited mobility in their hands and can't use a keyboard, they may not be able to navigate your website. So those two things don't quite come together. So we basically still encourage real user testing. It cannot replace real user testing. Testing your site with just a keyboard, and potentially also actually testing with a screen reader user or something along those lines to make sure you have a fully, or as close as you can, accessible website. So current challenges, oh no, screaming face emoji. I just outlined all these wonderful things, right? But it's far from perfect. We certainly have our challenges that we continuously run into. So we have this great sort of open clinic model, but we found it's really quite rare that any of folks, aside from the actual people directly involved with the website, actually attend the clinics. So this clinic model might not have this beautiful wide impact that we originally envisioned. In fact, Lucy's mentioned a lot of times that the volunteer web access clinics were far more attended than our like standardized ones.
We average 10 people at the volunteer ones, and we have ourselves and the developer and the owner of the site, and that's it.
Usually, yeah. And maybe it's because like now more and more folks are familiar, so they don't feel the need to come to another clinic and learn some of the stuff they already know. We don't really know why, but it is what it is. And the point is people are still coming and learning, so we're not going to get too upset about it, but it is something that we're aware of. We encounter the same issues in clinics over and over and over again, and it's a bit like a broken record. And some of these same instances are things like abuse of ARIA, accessible rich internet applications, if you're familiar with the concept. This abuse is like using these ARIA roles instead of the basic HTML element that does the same thing, and this is a really common abuse thing we see from developers. There's things like misuse of headings or just ignoring the basic keyboard functionality in favor of something else. And it starts to feel like we're sort of reciting from a script after a while. And it's not necessarily a bad thing. People are still learning, but we do wonder if there's a better way to do this and there's a better way to get the point across to people. And the procurement system is far from perfect. Plenty of vendors fill out the questionnaire and they just say yes to everything when they don't actually know what anything means. They don't know what saying yes, no, or partial actually refers to.
Or they don't fill it out at all.
Or they don't fill it out at all. Or the department purchasing the product pushes back on filling out the questionnaire and they say that it's not applicable to them when it actually is. A department recently tried to claim that the checklist wasn't applicable to them because it was an application that ran through a browser, and I'm using air quotes, which I was like, I don't really know how to even unpack this for you. So, and we tried, and I think for that particular situation, the poor buyer was trying to help put this in the right direction, but it was the department that was pushing back so much. So I think Lucy even had a phone call with the buyer and was like, you're doing everything right, just they're gonna do what they're gonna do, and that is what it is.
And the really sad part of this is that our unit is not a compliance unit, and we should not be a compliance unit. But there is no compliance unit. There is no one who's going to say, do not pass go, do not collect $200, you must put the checklist in. So if the buyer doesn't want to put the checklist in, we can't make them.
Yeah. So I mentioned our wonderful Open Berkeley platform that's got all these accessibility stuff built in. But the content creators on the sites can still make their own sort of interesting or questionable choices, right? And despite all the trainings and despite all the documentations, folks still put click here links all over their sites, or they misuse headings, or they put the entire text of a page in an image and they don't add any alt text. And if we encounter them, we gently point them out to people, but at the end of the day, we cannot police every single piece of content that gets published on a website because there's more than 140 at this point. And it's just also we're not there to police, we're there to help. So it's sort of
we're slowly rolling out Site Improve to all of those.
Yes.
We've probably got 7 or 8 of them so far in it.
Yeah.
It takes a long time, and we have to do some special training so that they understand what's theirs, what's ours.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and then, we have our website platform, but some departments may choose to use the more do-it-yourself site approach. They don't have to use our platform, especially if they need to use their own branding or something along those lines. But then, as a result, they're developing it from scratch, or they're hiring a third-party vendor who may not take accessibility best practices into the process. And we're at the mercy of whatever decisions they make. And then just I'm sure this is going to sound familiar to all of us, our resources are still limited at the end of the day, and the task list continues to grow and our time doesn't grow with it. So that's always a challenge. So what do we want to do next in order to maybe combat some of these challenges or at least keep moving forward? What we have in progress is something called DIY accessibility checklists, and I'm going to cover these in a little more detail in subsequent slides. But we hope that these checklists will help with the issue of us seeing the same problems over and over again. And the idea with the checklist is that we'll ask departments to consult them ahead of time and address all the applicable items, such as the sort of using native HTML elements when possible, doing keyboard testing, and then come and see us for the clinic so we can start getting into the more nuanced user testing. And then regarding the clinic model, we might think about, finding another way to get the word out about the benefits of attending more clinics, or maybe we need to look at a different date and time, that sort of thing. It's something that's on our minds.
It's hard to believe that 9:30 on Monday morning is harder than 8 a.m. on Friday morning, but it is.
It is somehow, yeah. We plan on expanding more of our website resources, of course. And then we do, as Lucy mentioned, we want to increase usage of Site Improve across the board, even for our managed sites. And increase participation in the trainings that are offered through Site Improve, the Site Improve Academy, because they've got a really great list of trainings on how to do things accessibly.
16 modules were developed just for UC.
Yeah.
That are available to all of you now in Site Improve, and soon will be available in the learning management in the UC Learning Center.
So a bit more about the DIY accessibility checklists. These are pretty much developed, but we're still sort of soliciting feedback and getting, the proper permission from leadership. I know how you all know probably what that's like. The idea, though, is we've created a master spreadsheet in Google Sheets that anyone's going to be free to copy, adapt, etc. That's anyone at the UC and anyone outside the UC. So there are 5 checklists in the master spreadsheet. There's a general WCAG review. There's a developer code review. That one's probably the most robust. There's also the keyboard testing checklist, the automated code inspection, which is basically use Site Improve or use some other kind of online tool. and then the test with real people checklist. Some of which we've noted as like strongly recommended versus recommended. So meaning do them all, but if you had to prioritize, here are the ones we strongly recommend. So this is just a screenshot of the DIY accessibility checklists page that we're going through, everything, the green color band and below. So these will be sort of an intro paragraph about what they're going to be, what people are finding when they come to them. Upfront information points folks to the individual checklists within the section, and then more information about each checklist, and then we'll link to the master spreadsheet. And then this next page is a spreadsheet of just the overview page, or sorry, a screenshot of the overview page within the spreadsheet. So it'll populate accordingly as the developer goes through and uses each of the individual checklists. So in this like in progress column, it'll populate as the developer marks an item as in progress, so to speak. And the same with does not pass, partially passes, passes, etc. So we tried to make it relatively easy to use without having to develop some fancy application for it, because we don't really have the bandwidth for that.
I mean, we're web developers when it comes to it in our unit. We didn't have the ability to create the web app.
No.
And we wanted to get this out there sooner than later.
Plus, we didn't want to create a form that we would be like on the receiving end of either, right? This is meant to be a resource for somebody to use and adapt for their purposes. So we figured Google Sheets is just fine. It might not look super fancy, but it does the job. This is a screenshot of the developer code review shot of the spreadsheet. So as you can see, there's these action items along with the status column. The default is needs review, but the next ones are things like passes or partially or whatever. And then there's a section where the developers themselves can add notes. And then there's also our own web access team notes that we put there as well that usually provides maybe some more context or explanation of what the actual action item means.
And that is if we meet with them.
Right. The overall status, as I said, is we're planning on getting some additional feedback first, but we want to make sure, we want to make sure we haven't missed anything that should be included, because this is sort of our first pass and our first sort of brain dump, but it doesn't mean that it's not incomplete. So when they're ready, we can certainly post them in the UC Tech Accessibility channel, the Slack channel, but we'll also, sort of mention to key partners when it's ready to spread far and wide. So in summary, the end, or is it? The conclusion I want to leave you all with is that we all know there's a policy, we're all working to uphold it, or at least we want to, and there's probably lots of efforts across all of our campuses, but are we reaching as far as we can go? What else we can do? And this leads essentially to our call to action, which is be impactful. So this is a photo of Lucy and I back in 2015. I realize it looks a little washed out here, but that's all right. It's coming through. So we were scheduled to present on how to implement an accessibility policy at an institution at EDUCAUSE back in 2015. And this photo was from our dry run that we did at the Bay Area Accessibility Meetup group. And I like this photo a lot for a number of reasons. One, Lucy is the main speaker. She's the main focus. And Lucy and I have presented at a lot of conferences together where we talk about sort of web accessibility at a higher level. And when we do that, I'm there to help out on a few points, but Lucy's story and Lucy's experience is at the forefront, absolutely. And Frances is with her in the shot. She's down there on the floor, and she's sitting on her foot, probably. The slide in the shot that you can see in the background is all about why accessibility is important, because it affects real people, and Lucy is telling her own personal story in this instance. And then more than likely the next slide in the presentation is Lucy moving on to do her screen reader demo, where she actually runs through a website using her screen reader. And for a lot of people in the room, it's their first time hearing it, and it's super impactful. So this leads arguably into what I think is the most important slide, which is the importance of working with people with disabilities. So I don't personally identify as somebody with a disability, and that's my choice to disclose that. And I would argue that I probably don't look or sound like someone with a disability. But I obviously think it's important to advocate for people with disabilities, and I help out as much as I can. If I'm going to go present to a campus department or a group and try to impart on them why web accessibility is important, people might listen, they might nod along and say wow, that's interesting, I didn't know that. But at the end of the day, I really do wonder, are they truly going to remember what was discussed after the fact? Is this information going to stick with them? Are they going to go back to their desk and just resume juggling their various competing priorities and forget most of what I said? probably, you can kind of make an argument there of how impactful it is. But when Lucy presents to that same department or that same group, with or without me, it is significantly more impactful. Her screen reader demo, her explanation of her experiences and her background and her story, this sticks with people. It truly has an impact. When I came in to interview with Lucy and the rest of the team, however many years ago, I went into that interview remembering when I attended one of Lucy's clinics back in the day, and that's huge. So, and as we know, automated testing does not catch everything. In general, websites and products are really incomplete without real user testing, and that includes working with people with disabilities in this instance. So our call to action is just to make it happen. It doesn't have to, maybe you don't have funds to hire someone full-time or part-time to do this for you, but you can contract with someone. Or Lucy's mentioned, like,
You all work at universities?
Yeah.
And every single one of those campuses has a disabled students program.
Yes. Offer Starbucks gift cards or Target gift cards or something for some kind of real user testing. That has to make it through the door. It's absolutely essential. So here's where I wanted to end it. I wanted to allow folks, if they wanted to share what's been their experience at their own campus as far as promoting, if they're their own stories or tips and tricks to share. Or if you have any questions, we're here to answer those as well. And I think right at the 5-minute mark almost. So, yeah.
And just as an FYI, there is already a pre-vetted contractor in Southern California, Central California, and Northern California that we can put you in touch with, who does exactly that accessibility testing.
So no excuses.
Yeah, right.
So questions?
So you mentioned that you had some contracts. Digital Deployment does the web pages for the School of Education here at UC Davis. And I honestly don't know if they're doing anything, but I'm a wellness ambassador and I have some past experience before I came to UC, and so I figured this would be something good to take on and get new in the community as well. So do you do anything with digital deployment?
Digital deployment.
Yeah, they're out of Sacramento, and it's just one of the companies I didn't know. Maybe they might have clients all over California, so I just thought I'd mention the name. So,
Yeah, no, they're not one of the contractors we've seen sites for.
okay.
We're not allowed to endorse anyone, so I can't tell you which ones do come to our clinics.
Well, we can say that they've come. We just can't say whether or not we like them or not,
Yeah.
or that we recommend them or not, or whatever.
What I'm talking about is the ones that return because they think the service is valuable.
Oh, sure.
And they end up being the ones that are actually doing a better job.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I know it's template driven, and I know that it's the coloring and stuff like that is very specific for UCA's coloring, and I have no idea if that is an accessibility outline form or whatever.
So these are templates that are used by UC Davis for their websites or for something else. Interesting, yeah.
Website,
And then is that at all connected to like Sean DeArmond's group?
Yes.
It is.
The fact that Sean is my second level support, if my clients have problems, that is something we can't do for them.
Got it.
So if he needs to make changes, he would make the changes. So if he's involved with you guys, then that may be happening. I don't know.
We have a lot of faith in Sean.
Well,
I've never reviewed a Sean site though.
Okay, so yeah. So I actually don't speak to Sean directly because he's the manager of John.
Right.
Sean's the manager of John, and so I usually speak with John.
So what I would encourage them is, so I think Sean at this very conference has actually started using Site Improve for the first time to start testing, say, the Site Farm instance, which is the big,
That's a big one.
yeah, here at UC Davis in particular. Thank you. So that would be also for this, whatever website instance or template you're talking about. You could encourage them to start with Site Improve as far as getting those sites, or even just one sample site, especially if it's like an example of a template that's used widely or whatever. Run that through, see how it goes. It will, again, give you a good sort of snapshot of how it's doing from an accessibility perspective, and then you could start talking about if you need to do more advanced user testing or anything along those lines.
If you want to reach out, I can get you the name of those 3 people, and maybe you can bring one of them up for a day of looking at 1 or 2 of these for you.
Yeah, like actual screen reader testing. Yeah.
And there's going to be a lot of people who will say to you, I can test with a screen reader for you, but if that person isn't, a person who lives screen reader, they're not going to do a good job of testing it for you.
Yeah.
Anna probably could test with a screen reader.
I won't though.
Yeah.
I work 10 feet from Lucy, so.
But it's very different. I mean, even I bet Chris could probably test with a screen reader, but she's going to do it very differently than a person who lives.
Because the way Lucy puts it is like, if you're a person who is a sighted individual and you fire up a screen reader, you can cheat at the end of the day and just be like, when I'm too frustrated, I'm just going to open my eyes, you know? And it's like, well, someone who actually.
I'm going to grab my mouse.
Yeah, yeah.
And you should grab your mouse. You should. But it's also a huge waste of energy and a huge waste of your time. Do the fixes. Get a person with a disability to help you understand what their experiences are. And hey, you're getting a person who might otherwise be unemployed a job.
Yeah. Having said that, if you really want to get an experience of what it's like to be, how frustrating it is to try to use a screen reader to navigate anything, then by all means, all of our smartphones come equipped with a screen reader built in, right? So you can like turn it on for kicks and try to navigate through your home screen and open up your applications and experience how difficult it can be, and then you'll have an idea of like, oh my God.
An appreciation for hiring somebody that is a screen reader.
Exactly, who knows exactly what to do, and you start feeling like, I'm going to do anything I can to help in this instance.
I do a curriculum for mobile app developers on, how important it is to do accessibility. And the exercise I have them do is use your smartphone to take a selfie with the screen curtain on using VoiceOver.
It's like, yeah, just try it and see how it goes.
And we
I just froze just thinking about
Yeah.
we worked with one of the vendors for our campus on this, and he now includes the selfie he took in all his presentations on accessibility. And how does it look, Anna?
Which one is this?
The one from Eric from Moto.
Oh, it looks pretty good.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there you go.
that just his forehead.
Yeah. Close up of his nose or something.
Well,
Yeah.
I mean, so it's obviously an exercise you've never done, so you should try it, because the iPhone will actually guide you through.
I'll do that.
Any other questions? We have just like 2 minutes, so.
What are you doing at your campuses?
Anything?
I don't know.
Yeah.
Does anybody else know that?
Davis does have a unit that web applications can be submitted to, and I don't know the name of it or how detailed they go into it. There's an accessibility unit that you can ask to review your apps.
Cool.
I guess.
Well, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.